it's running without plan. Okay? What do you think of? What picture pops in your head when you hear scurrying?
Rats.
Yeah, lights come on, cockroaches, something. What if you read a news story about, say there was a small fire at a school, say a school that your kid or a kid that you love goes to, and you read the story the next day and said, as the fire alarm rang out, students and administrators and teachers scurried. You'd be like, what? You'd be outraged. You'll never read that. Here's what you'll read. As the fire alarm rang out, students and teachers and administrators responded. Because that's what they'll do. Those teachers are on it. The fire drill, they do this all the time. The kids know it. They know what they're doing. They respond. They don't scurry. So, 2 weeks ago, there was a shooting in New Jersey at a mall. Anybody hear about it? You see it? Kind of scary at first. It looked like it was going to be an active shooter. It turned out to be a suicide. But the people in the mall didn't know that. They just heard gunshots in the mall. So I'm reading about this and doing what I do when one of these things happen. I go into my research room, and I read a story that made my heart so happy. I stood up in my hotel room and literally clapped. If someone had been watching me, they would have thought it was great. It was one of the best things I've ever read. So this lady worked in a store in the mall, and she said, they were interviewing her, she said, we were in our store, and we heard gunshots right out there in the mall. And then she said, our manager came running out of the back, and he said, all right, everybody, just like we practiced, because he had been drilling us. We've been working on this, and we knew our plan was if the shots were coming from here, we couldn't go that way, so we executed plan B, and we went. And I'm just reading that, and I'm saying, wow, those people did not screw it. They responded. Same as our kids in school. Real quick, sidebar on schools, trivia time for you. How many kids in America have we lost to fire in public school in the last 50 years? How many dead kids in public schools in our country? In 50 years from a fire? None. Thank you. Zero. None. Not one. Is it because our kids are suddenly asbestos people and they're fireproof? No, it's because as a country, we decided a long time ago, hey, you know, fire's a threat. And it's really not okay that our little kids are burning up in schools. And they used to be. Fire, it's still dangerous, for goodness sakes, right? Look at this room. Fire sprinklers, there's fire code wiring in these walls. You're sitting on flame retardant material. There's fire alarms. Fire drills, fire marshals, fire this, fire that, fire phasers, fire everything, right? We took it seriously. Now the schools are coming along, okay? We're slower to the table with violence. How many kids have we lost to violence in public schools in the last 50 years? So, you're looking at me and saying, well, tell us, Mr. Staff. It's off the charts bad. I'm only going to tell you 1 year. I'll just say 2009. How about 48 dead kids, 250,000 physically injured kids, an untold number emotionally and mentally traumatized in our public schools, where we lost no one to fire. That's not okay, right? So it's coming along. It's getting better. It was slow to the table. I do some work with schools beyond this DOE thing. In fact, I know a lot more about school programs and violence than I do other stuff. And there is reason to hope it's getting better. Okay, enough of that for now. It's a big company, and therefore, statistically speaking, they had it coming. And here's the part where the poor company spokesperson has to say something, right? And they always have to say something, and it usually sounds something like this: the welfare of our people is of utmost importance to us. And I'll just, my 2 cents on this is, I personally have a real tough time reconciling that statement there with scurvy. Because I know, having looked into these for so long, if that company had done things, those employees had any level of preparedness, someone would have said something. Someone would have said, like that at the LA airport, all of those airport security and airport police people in the media over the next few days, all of them saying, it was so great, we had just been doing active shooter training. We did this big exercise, and it helped us so much. That stuff comes out, and I find no such here. So. The fact is, about 10% of companies in America have a really vibrant, robust prevention program that includes stuff like that. So we got a ways to go. Now, here's the part where the pack of ravenous dogs finds out the guy's name, so they go to his neighborhood to torture his neighbors and family and find out more. And by the way, it almost always looks like this at first. So here's Mr. Lemon Meyer, kindly neighbor, and he is shocked. He cannot believe this. This person came and raked the leaves for me. And look at the money line right here. He brought chocolate cake for Christmas. And there is no way, and in my book, folks, nobody that brings chocolate cake for Christmas could possibly do that, right? Right? And he's right, and I'm right, and you're right. They don't. Because the guy that brought the chocolate cake is not the guy that did this. Because the guy that did this had taken the final step and became that monster, and he was not the same man. I'm sure he's a nice guy, right? Now, back to did he snap or not. As they're talking to this elderly neighbor, he suddenly starts remembering some things. And he says, well, you know, now that you mention it, a few years ago he said he was having trouble on the job. And then he says, look at it's underlined there, he says, recently, whoa, now that you mention it, recently, he said, that he was being retaliated against, and people were being treated unfairly. Now, way back, an hour ago, when we had those behaviors up there, and we had the injustice collector, and I said, remember this part about perceived injustice, blah, blah, blah. That's very common. That's a key player in a lot of these. I'll tell you why in a second. There's another neighbor. He seemed like a really nice guy. I am convinced that this was a nice man. And a lot of times, the monsters, before they were monsters, were nice people. Sometimes they weren't. Sometimes they were jerks their whole life. This one, I think, was a nice man. But none of that matters, because now he's a monster. And here's how he gets there. They all take the same, it's 5 stages, period, all right? It looks a little different. Some of them are in each stage, a little longer, a little less long, but they all go through these stages. And in fact, there's actually 6. There's a pre-stage. Call it stage 0. The first thing that anyone, you, me, anybody, the first hurdle we have to get over if we're going to kill somebody is we have to come to a point where we're able to do that. Because we're not born with that. We're not born to kill each other. There's a gentleman named Dave Grossman, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. He's one of the smartest human beings on this planet, as far as I'm concerned. He retired from the U.S. Army. While in the Army, he taught psychology at West Point. He's a warrior. Since he got out of the Army in 1998, he retired. All he does with his life, he's a crusader. He goes around and he helps and teaches schools, law enforcement, and military. On this topic and lots of other related topics. He really, really gets it. He's the smartest guy about the human condition that I've ever listened to. He's written a couple books. They're famous in some circles. One of them is called On Killing. The other is called On Combat. If you ever want to read books that will help you understand a lot better about what makes people tick, these are great books. In On Killing, he explains how difficult it is, and has been over millennia, for militaries to get people to be efficient killers, because it doesn't come natural. And so every military that's ever existed has had to do that. Now, I've been in the military. I was in the Marine Corps. I've been on both ends of it. I've been the brainwashed recruit, and I've been training recruits, right? So I know what it takes to get people to that point. In his book, he talks about World War I and World War II veterans. And there's a lot of good evidence now that a lot of our guys in those wars were shooting to miss. They just couldn't bring themselves to kill another person. So the military's always had this problem, all militaries. And there's a couple of ways that they use to get over it. And a couple of very effective ways.